It's about history, policy, and impact. A new perspective on current affairs, bringing experience, insight, civility, and scholarship to the urgent issues of today. It's about our past, present, and future. Your host, Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist, Douglas Blackman. From the University of Virginia's Miller Center, this is American Forum.
Welcome back to American Forum. I'm Doug Blackman. Americans are experiencing what feels like a pivotal moment in the history of our political process. It's not just that the 2016 campaign was coarse and deeply polarizing. The ground actually seems to be shifting beneath us all. We sometimes forget that the strict two-party competition between Republicans and Democrats hasn't always been that way. Major parties have come and gone in American history. The Federalists, so important in the early years of the Republic, died off in a few short decades. The Jeffersonian Republicans, the Whigs, the National Republicans, the Liberty Party, Greenbacks, Free Soil, all had extended or brief moments and then faded long ago. Through the past 100 years, we have seen waves surge among the parties with anxieties about immigration or battles over racial preferences and economic setbacks. In the last 50 years, the Democratic Party changed profoundly from the great defender of Southern white supremacy and racial segregation to the party of Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders. Now the modern Republican Party and the conservative movement itself are wrestling to define themselves in the 21st century. What will the GOP look like in the years ahead? Does Trumpism redefine Republicanism? Where does the Tea Party fit in? Is the Libertarian Party finally for real? And in the midst of all these changes, how is the system going to work? Who's going to pay for our politics? Big companies, anonymous organizations, huge donors, tiny donors? Who will be allowed to pay? Who has to reveal their activities? Does everyone still get to speak? And how does a president from any party establish a clear mandate from the people? In this episode of American Forum, we turn back to our special series on the future of American conservatism. Joining us is Kimberley Strassel, who writes the regular Potomac Watch column for the editorial page of the Wall Street Journal. She's also the author of a new book, The Intimidation Game: How the Left is Silencing Free Speech. Thank you for being here, Kim.
Great to be here, Doug.
So we are taping this before the election. But most of the things we're going to talk about won't have anything to do with the actual election, and we will broadcast this on public television after the election. But for now, let's talk a little bit, though, about the campaign itself. During the primaries, you're a conservative writer for the Wall Street Journal, and you had some real skepticism about the ultimate nominee for the Republican Party. But how do you see Donald Trump at this stage, and how do you see the state of the presidential campaign?
I still do have a lot of skepticism about the ultimate Republican nominee, because Donald Trump is obviously something very different for conservatism. And we had this incredible crew of candidates out there, 17 in total. I think it was a very healthy competition that was had in the end, despite all of the mudslinging and some arguments. There were some good discussions to be had. Look, I think the worry here for conservatives in the more long term is that you've got a nominee that's much more populist than has ever been out there before. That doesn't seem to have the same interest in sort of basic conservative principles that many conservatives care about. How he's going to change that long term, I don't know, but I do think that there are upsides to Donald Trump being there as well.
Yeah, well, tell us about this.
Well, so mostly I think what Donald Trump has done is make some of the leading conservatives out there, leading Republicans rather, I should say, recognize that there has been this silent, probably majority within the Republican base. It feels as though some of the issues that really matter to them have not been addressed. I also think Donald Trump has forced the party to realize that it needs to do a better job of outreach, in part because he doesn't always do it very well, and it's a way to put a microscope on some of the broader problems that Republicans have had in reaching out to people.
Yeah, it jumped out at me at the point that when Trump got into another round of criticism after his remarks about what do you have to lose to African Americans, and this what was taken by many people as overly sweeping descriptions of the problems in the inner city. But it was striking to me that as problematic as that was for many people who were interested in those issues, I think I even tweeted something out that day that said at least both parties now finally agree that the problems in the inner city are really a problem.
Yes.
He was able to say that more explicitly than typically a Republican nominee has quite been able to, or willing to do it.
No, and you have seen it's happened behind the scenes because there's been so much focus on the broader presidential election. But if you look, for instance, at what Paul Ryan is doing in the House with his anti-poverty initiatives, it is based not on policy, but on a new way of looking at this. He's worked with Robert Woodson, who's a very influential figure in a lot of inner city communities. And that message there has been, you can't just talk about this. You can't just sit and write on a piece of paper, here's a problem, here's how we'll fix it. You got to show up. You got to go into these places and learn what the problems are firsthand and get the cooperation of the local community and show that you have a legitimate understanding of what the problem is. So to the extent you see Republicans doing that in the House and in the Senate, and now you've got a presidential candidate who is trying to draw attention to it, I think that that's an interesting and important shift for the conservative movement overall. I do find it difficult, if you talk to anybody out there and you look at the history of the idea that he's a racist, I find a little bit harder to believe. He lives in New York, he's worked with a wide array of people. So of all the things that you could say, is he hot-headed? Does he have some bad policy ideas? Absolutely. I find that one a harder charge to actually believe, and I find it a bit remarkable that you have a rival candidate who would make it.
Yeah, it is there has been a level of severity of language across the board.
On both sides.
On both sides. That maybe is one of the most unique dimensions of all of this. So you've written a book that I think would surprise a lot of people in its premise, in that, and correct me if I stated wrong, but that you make the case that Citizens United, this ruling that generally when it's talked about particularly by liberals, that Citizens United is this terrible thing, and that it has stripped away all the campaign finance restrictions and has unleashed all sorts of terrible forces and dark money in the political system, and that it's kind of a conservative plot of its own. That would be the conventional liberal telling of Citizens United. You make the case that Citizens United actually, in some respects, is the opposite of that, and that it sets in motion a left-wing, a coordinated effort of some sort to intimidate speech and political activity at the other end of the spectrum across the board. So that's, I think, a fairly unfamiliar idea to a lot of people in the beginning. Yeah. So break that down. How is it that Citizens United did that?
Well, let's think how we got to Citizens United, because I think that's a really important starting point. So for about 100 years, the United States has been slowly imposing more and more campaign finance laws. Now, some people call them campaign finance laws. I call them speech laws, because the reality is money is a proxy for speech. There just isn't really any way. Money is not speech, okay, we can stipulate that, but money is a proxy for speech and it enables speech. If you said you were going to run for the presidency and I said, that's great, Doug, but you can only have $50, I think that we agree that you would have difficulty getting your message out to a nation of 320 million people. Money does enable. So you got more of it, you usually have more speech, less of it, you have less speech. Also bear in mind why the politicians layered these on. You will hear often from many of them, and I have no doubt there are reformers out there who believe that these laws are about cleaner elections, anti-corruption. That's not why the politicians pass it. You've spent time in Washington. Often it's driven by very base motives. They're trying to put restrictions on their opponents from operating in elections. And both sides have done this over the years. Republicans did it to Democrats by imposing restrictions on speech for unions, for instance. Democrats did it to Republicans by imposing restrictions on corporations, because those different groups tended to always support one side or the other. These things got piled up, layered up. Finally, we get McCain-Feingold, very big, mammoth, mother of all campaign finance restrictions, and the Supreme Court says, we cannot tolerate this anymore. You have just gone one step too far. You've impeded on basic First Amendment freedoms. We are clearing a bunch of these things away. Now, at this point, a lot of conservatives cheered because it was a victory for the First Amendment and the ability to speak. Democrats saw it very differently. They'd come very much to rely on these laws to, in fact, keep some of their biggest nemesis out of the political process, like corporations. They hated the fact that they were being let in. It was 2010. Very difficult midterm election coming up. Already all the signs of a blowback from the public, Tea Party groups going in. So they had a very public discussion, and you can see it, I trace it in the book, where they say, all right, we can no longer legally bar our opponents from taking part in elections, so we're going to do the next best thing. We're going to scare them, harass them, intimidate them, and generally send the message that if they choose to go forward and use these rights that have been restored to them by the Supreme Court, that they will pay some sort of political price or personal price.
The big incident that is most known to people that you talk a lot about is the scandal around the IRS and the charge that the IRS had specifically identified Tea Party groups to slow approval of their tax-exempt status. But so tell us and you make a big character in your book is a woman named Karen Kinney from the San Fernando Valley. But so what was it that happened to Karen Kinney, and how does it fit into this campaign of intimidation?
So I think the important thing here is one of the tactics that is now being used is to mobilize the federal bureaucracy against your opponents. Again, can't legally bar them from taking part, but you can scare them by sicking the federal government on them instead. This is what happened to Karen Kinney. She ran a very small little group, a Tea Party organization out there. By the way, they were hardly even political, and to the extent they were, very nonpartisan. They do consider themselves constitutional conservatives, but mostly they did things like show up at Memorial Day events and hold signs of fallen soldiers, arrange food banks in their neighborhood and everything. But they did get one idea. They wanted to get nonprofit status because they wanted to collect money and run a get out the vote campaign. Not on one side, they just wanted to run these billboards in their area that said, go vote. You know, you need to go vote. And so they go through the process, fill out the forms, and were just harassed for years and years with questionnaires. They couldn't get their status. And this continued until such a point that she actually withdrew her application. When she started getting forms from the IRS saying, tell us the names of all of your donors, tell us everything you talk about at your meetings, tell us who the politicians are that you're in touch with, who comes and speaks for you. She just was too worried that she was putting the people in her group at risk of some sort of federal plot. And by the way, we know how this came to be. This was not some line agents in Cincinnati who didn't understand the law. We had Senate Democrats writing letters to the IRS demanding that they take actions against the very groups that they did. We had the President of the United States out on the stump almost every day warning about shadowy groups that had been unleashed. We didn't know if they were operating illegally. Somebody ought to do something about it. And we had a very partisan IRS bureaucracy led by Lois Lerner who listened to all these things and did take specific, deliberate action to put these groups on ice.
Are we talking about a broad, well-coordinated, multi-part effort to accomplish the things you're talking about? Or is it more that you've got perhaps an agency that's not behaving the way that it ideally would, maybe some people who have gone off the trail in some respect, but that it is a series of foolish mistakes by individuals as opposed to a big coordinated conspiracy?
No, it was coordinated. Look, we have their notes and the emails from people inside of the IRS and the Treasury Department. You know, and a couple of things that I think that are really revealing here, Doug, is that Lois Lerner did this. A lot of people who were around her knew what was going on. There were people out in Cincinnati who were sending her notes saying, what's happened to all these applications? You guys took over this process. We have an obligation to give these people their status. What are you folks doing out there? You know, saying, and by the way, we have an election coming up. So this really looks bad and we should be doing something about it. They got the hand. Nobody gave an answer to them because these things were being locked up and sort of drawn out on purpose slowly so that these groups would not be allowed to operate during the 2010 midterm elections, but also the 2012 presidential election. And I think that this is, again, one of the really revealing things. Senior members of the Treasury Department understood that something was rotten in Denmark early in 2012 because the IRS had begun sending out all these letters to these groups. And these groups had come to Congress and said, we're getting harassed by the IRS. So Congress had begun investigations. Senior members of the Treasury, what's going on? They deputize people to go and look at Lois Lerner's department. They know this is happening. And then they keep it quiet in front of congressional inquiries for the rest of 2012. And they don't bring this out until 2013. You know, if you knew something was really bad at the IRS and you knew it in March of 2012 and Congress is asking you about it, you would say so, unless you really didn't want people to have nonprofit status for the rest of a presidential election.
All right, I want to circle back on some of this, but let's also talk about some of the other things that you write about that are not really specific to the IRS, including a sequence of events that happens in Wisconsin and Milwaukee County, but that very dramatic description you've got. But tell us what happened there.
Yeah, so this is another tactic. I mean, again, one, sicking federal employees on people. Another one, liberal prosecutors who abuse their positions. So what you have up in Wisconsin, and I think this is the most scary part of this book. You have up in Wisconsin is about 30 conservative groups who defended those government reforms, those very controversial government reforms that Governor Scott Walker put in Wisconsin. As this is going on, a little bit after this happens, all 30 of those groups end up getting subpoenas. And it turns out that they are under a secret investigation into supposed campaign finance allegations. Now, again, to put this in context, 97% of looks at campaign finance allegations are civil. Okay, but now these people are the subject of a criminal inquiry into campaign finance allegations, and it's being done under a special law in Wisconsin called the John Doe Law, which allows the prosecutors to conduct it in secret. So these people have their financial records taken, their emails tracked, all of their interactions watched, their phones are looked at. There are pre-dawn raids at their houses, okay? The cops show up in the morning to drag stuff out of their house. And by the way, one of the worst stories in here, one of the targets of this entire probe, he and his wife were off on a charitable fundraising trip. Their teenage son is home alone. The police come in the early morning dark. They put him in a room. They tell him that he cannot call his grandparents who live down the road. He asks if he can call an attorney. They tell him no. They take things out of his house, leave, and as they leave, say, by the way, this is being pursuant under a gag order. You tell anyone what happened to you this morning, you can go to jail. So these are the kind of tactics that are being used. It's only because a very brave man came to the Wall Street Journal and told us what was happening in all this that this even came out in the end. A lawsuit ended up getting filed, went all the way up to the state Supreme Court. The state Supreme Court had to shut this probe down, and in doing so, and I'm paraphrasing a bit here, but one of the sentences in their ruling was, the prosecutors in this case had invented theories of law in order to go after citizens who were wholly innocent of wrongdoing.
But we're in this world of massive manipulation across the board, that where everybody is, and maybe it was always this way, there are just more levers now, but where every constituency seems to be engaged in some version of this. If you've got a state legislature, then you're redistricting to preserve your position there. If you want more minorities to vote, then you push hard for more relaxed voting procedures. If you don't do well with minorities, then you want there to be fewer voting days. And so all across the board, it seems to me that everybody is flexing whatever they can flex for political advantage without so much consideration of, is this really good for the country, or what are the basic principles at work here? I mean, and so I guess, one, would you agree with that? And two, what I guess I'm really pushing against is the suggestion that this is a left versus right phenomenon, as opposed to that this is just the system gone awry.
No, because what you're talking about there, you're talking about actions that have people taken, for instance, to sort of change the laws, within a state, for instance, on the voting right things. This is about abusing federal power, abusing state power to scare people out of politics, to put them into legal jeopardy. To actually, we've got examples in there. I have an example there of a man who gave money to a Romney super PAC back in 2012, okay? And name of Frank Vandersloot. He gives a sizable donation. He's a wealthy businessman out in Idaho, $1 million. President Obama's campaign team took his name and that of 7 other individuals. They got him from financial disclosure records, because if you give money to super PACs, it has to be disclosed. And they put them on the campaign website, accused them of all kinds of terrible things, said they were bad people, that they were potentially criminals, etc. Within a couple of months, this guy had had a private investigator riffling through his divorce records. He'd had 2 visits from the IRS. He'd never had an audit before, both of his personal finances and his business finance. The Department of Labor showed up to inspect his ranch. I mean, as he said, when the president named me out there, he put a target on my back. So those are the kind of tactics that I'm talking about in the book, and I don't believe that they are in fact happening on each side. I'm an equal opportunity First Amendment believer, and when I went to go write this book, I looked for examples of this on both sides. It's not happening. And I think that's in part because conservatives are a little bit more hardwired. They believe in limited government, they believe in more restraint from government, and they believe in the Constitution and the First Amendment. It's the kind of one of some of their guiding basic principles. And so they tend not to. Now, there are a couple of examples in there where they have gone awry. But for the most part, this is a racket that is being practiced by an organized political left. And I say that by distinction to liberals, left of center voters.
Okay, let's fast forward to February 2017. You're sitting at your desk in the Washington Bureau of the Wall Street Journal. Your phone rings, you pick it up, and it's someone in the office of President Donald Trump who says, I've been reading your column for years. Do you have any idea if that actually is the case? I'm not
going to hazard a guess on.
The message is that Donald Trump's been reading your column for years. He wants you to come over and talk to him for 15 minutes and tell he's aware of the things that you pointed out here. What's your message to President Donald Trump?
Yeah, two things is one, we do have to set up a situation in which federal bureaucrats are stripped of their ability to make quantitative judgments about politics. And there are ways to do that in which you remove their power. I mean, in my perfect world as a conservative, I would do it by removing much of the federal bureaucracy, right? It'd be much better to have a flat tax code because then there's no judgment involved in that whatsoever. But if you can't do that, there needs to be some sort of proactive ability to remove some of this decision making from the bureaucrats, put it in the hands of people that are appointed and accountable. That would be one thing. Two, rethink our disclosure laws in this country. Disclosure these days is being used to get the names of people to go and target and harass. Disclosure is supposed to be about citizens being able to keep track of their government. Increasingly, it's about government and activists being able to track and harass citizens. So we need to completely revamp our disclosure regime in this country.
So let's say you give that advice to President Trump, and then he says to you, "That's great. Those are good suggestions. Somebody write that down."
Those are huge.
Those are huge, bigly. Those are hugely bigly, excellent, most excellent and incredible suggestions. But then he says, "What can I do to try to unify and create a real mandate in the first few weeks ahead, so that in this first year of my presidency, I can really accomplish big things?" What do you tell the president?
Honestly, to put all of his time and effort behind one big initiative and get it done. Because this is the problem, is Americans just look and they think that nothing can get done in Washington, nothing that makes life better for them. Okay, the last big thing we had was President's health care law. It has not made life better for many, many people. That remains very unpopular. It has for some. But this is not viewed as a sort of, rock'em sock'em success out there. And so, whether it be a very bold tax reform, something, and say, this is what we're going to make happen, and then go out there and meet with Democrats, meet with both sides, and say, we're going to get this done together. What do I need to bring you on?
All right, let's spin the time machine again. It's once more, it's February the 1st of 2017. You get a phone call. Now it's from the office of President Hillary Clinton, who has squeaked through to a victory over Donald Trump. You're not on the same side as me politically.
And she has not read my columns.
and I have not read your columns, but I hear you've got some good ideas, and I want to hear from the other side because I have got to build a bigger coalition. I've got to have some sort of mandate. It's going to be better for the country if there's some sort of unity. I'm calling on you as a patriot. Come and give me some advice about these first steps that I can take so that I can have the most successful first year.
Well, first of all, I would advocate that she do the same thing I suggested with Donald Trump and the bureaucrats and the disclosure. But the other thing is to drop this promise that she has made. She said that within her first month, she's going to try to get rid of Citizens United. Essentially go and propose a new amendment that it's never put that way, but it would in essence give government control over speech. And I think that's an incredibly disturbing thing. James Madison kind of had it right with the First Amendment. We probably don't want putting a bunch of elected people in charge of that. And it's a very disturbing idea that should in general be dropped.
Is there anything that President Hillary Clinton could do that could be seen as a gesture toward whatever we want to call them, centrist Republicans, or maybe all Republicans, or a gesture to the people that she referred to as deplorables? Is there something that Hillary Clinton could do as president that would be accepted as being valid in any way that would bridge any of those sorts of divides?
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I think there are things out there that both sides understand need to get done. I mean, for instance, corporate tax reform. That's a great one for any candidate to jump into and do right away. Both sides understand that we're just getting killed out there internationally because we have one of the highest tax rate, corporate tax rate out there. Definitely going to be a lot of division over how it's done exactly, but great common ground as a place to start.
Kim Strassel, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
The book is The Intimidation Game: How the Left is Silencing Free Speech. If you'd like to send us a comment about this episode or join an ongoing conversation about the future of American politics, go to the Miller Center Facebook page or follow us on Twitter. My handle is @DouglasBlackman. You can reach our guest @Kim Strassel. To watch other episodes of American Forum, share them with your friends, join our email list, or read a transcript of this dialogue, visit us at millercenter.org, American Forum. I'm Doug Blackman. See you again next week.